recording. Okay. Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you to the September 16th regularly scheduled City Council meeting. If you could all join us in the Pledge of Allegiance and stand, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. If we can get a roll call, please.
Mayor Bellinger?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hagan?
Here.
Councilmember Engel?
Here.
Councilmember Walker? Here. Councilmember Stroman?
Here.
Thank you. First up is our consent calendar. These items are considered routine in nature and are acted upon by a single action unless requested by an individual council member or a member of the public for special consideration. Are there any items here at the dais that we would like to pull from the consent calendar tonight? Was there anything in the audience that there was a concern with our consent calendar that we wanted further discussion on? If not, I'll take a motion on the consent calendar.
A motion to approve the consent calendar. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next up, we have staff communications and updates. Who gets to go first tonight? Celinda.
Me.
What do we got for us tonight?
Okay, I think, good evening, everyone. I have our staff updates, our treasurer's report for August. And I can find my page in here. Nothing new really to report on there. We're just going through our second month of the year. Everything's going along nicely. We don't have anything to give any ratios or anything until we have a few months under the belt there. And our consent calendar, we just went through that. We did have our double on the register of demands because we had missed last week's meeting, so a little bit bigger than normal. There is a report in there that shows some of the items we have for general fund, so if anyone wants to look at that. Other than that, is there any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay,
Good to go?
that's it for me.
Thanks.
So this month, we extended the recruitment for the police officer position. We didn't really get a lot of applications, so we posted it online. I posted them on Indeed and ZipRecruiter. Didn't get a lot of qualified applicants through ZipRecruiter. Through Indeed, we got at least 3 that have qualifications, and then I'm still reaching out to 4 others who may or may not have their post certificate. I'm still waiting to hear back from them. So it has worked. We have increased our applicant pool. Officer Palomino led the department in arrests this month with 12. And Officer DeGiulio led the department in citations with 21 citations. And then a quick follow-up for the animal control issue as far as the feral cats go. Mayor Pro Tem Hagan was correct after speaking with animal control. They do behavior testing on the feral cats when they come in and see which ones can have their behavior modified and be calm enough to adopt out. Unfortunately, many of them don't. However, they don't routinely, they don't just euthanize cats because they're feral. They do attempt to rehabilitate them.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, just a couple project updates and a little slideshow on the finalization of one. The Kerrigan lift station is wrapping up. We're in the process right now with a punch list. We think that has been taken care of. We're going to go through that in the next few days, hopefully to close that out, which will lead into the next project, which is the striping. We're almost complete with that. We have a few days left, which Kerrigan Sanchez is one of those areas. And also, the Crossroads Plaza Sidewalk project has been completed. I'm not sure if any of you have seen it, but we do have a few before and after pictures that we'd like to share with you. So before, obviously, one of the issues we had here, as you can see, the sidewalk between the trees and the landscape there was majorly lifted up and down, and it's been that way for years. Again, it's another view as you're walking down the sidewalk. This is some of the trip hazards that you did have. Again, with the driveway, extreme amount of potholes, unlevelness, a lot of landscape water runoff we think was going on through the years. And then the after pictures, project went really well. As you can see, the nice sidewalk, we kind of pushed a little bit to the east there just to get us a little bit more room from the trees. Nice ADA sidewalk. We were able to get the asphalt driveway in. You can see there was a little bit of water there that we hope have repaired since then, but definitely going to keep an eye on that. Project and all went very well. The compost around the tree that we get from Jilton has turned out fantastic, and it was just a good project from start to finish for us.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
On those, just a simple thought, but when, say, trees go down or you're going to replace trees, do you guys talk to an arborist or someone who specializes in what specific tree would potentially not lift up those concrete spots in the first place, or maybe like a different approach? Like in some cities, they sink them deeper, those boxes.
Yeah, we definitely we've, Diane and I actually both in the last few years, we've gone through and we have an approved tree list that we have worked through
Cool.
for residents in town. And that can be various reasons of trees. It can be trees that are between sidewalk and in your yard. Once it can go in the middle of the yard, we have trees that can go in the middle of the park. So yes, when we are going back and planting tree, very much, especially Public Works, is very mindful of what goes in there for root issues, sidewalk issues, things like that.
Glad to hear that. Mr. Collins.
Yes, sir.
Actually, I'm going to ask staff to go back to the PowerPoint for a second. Never mind. I didn't see the do not enter signs, and I was worried about that car driving
Oh, sure, yeah.
through the intersection.
I wanted to put spikes in, but I got told I couldn't.
Be nice on the other side as well.
Yeah. Sure. That's all for Public Works. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, a couple items here. We did receive from the consultant the audit report. We still have work to do on our end and then send it back to them. Our goal at this point is to bring it forward at the next council meeting. But again, it is in the consultant's, will be tomorrow in the consultant's court, so we cannot make a guarantee to the 10/7 meeting, but that is our goal at this time. Also, we have the audit RFP out right now. It closes this week on the 19th, so we hope to get a good selection there for our upcoming audits. Along that same vein, we do have a recruitment out for the city clerk position, Jenny's position. Formally, that closes on the 20th. I can tell you we have almost a couple of dozen applications right now, so that is promising so far. So we will go through that process and hope to get someone on board soon. Again, in the same vein, we have reached out. Diana Trejo has been very gracious to help us out in the interim. We do have a consultant coming in to help just mostly with the city clerking stuff. We have multiple staff right now doing double, triple duty. So trying to share a bit of the workload. We've costed it out. It's definitely under what the position cost us, Jenny's position, for the consultant work. So we think that is a good strategy, again, to share some of the workload. So a consultant through RGS will be virtual next meeting and helping us with the city clerking duties.
Ask you a question. Excuse me. Do you feel like it's creating any internal staff issues, or do you feel like you guys are all on the same page, in other words, when it comes to that, or is that creating any kind of contention?
How short-staffed we are?
Well, obviously you're short-staffed, but like spreading out that extra work that Jenny was doing.
Yeah.
Is that, I guess, are you thinking that as like a long-term decision, or is that?
Oh, no.
You're
No.
still trying to fill that gap?
Yeah. So the recruitment closes on Friday. That's the one we have a couple dozen applications for. No, we will try to fill that position as quickly as possible.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah. A couple follow-ups from prior council meetings. Last time we talked about the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights training. We are coordinating per the discussion and per the advice of the city attorney, just with the labor groups briefly, to, make sure there are no sort of issues there that aren't meet and confer or would be a meet and confer. Once we get that nailed down with the labor groups, then we can bring it back for the council's final consideration. And we expect, again, per the conversation, that training to start after the new year. And then Fire 2+2, I've talked with Chief Mello. We agree, we're going through an election, they're going through an election, that our meetings would start after the new year as well. So again, a couple of items from prior council meetings. And something that'll come before you here shortly, we did hold last Wednesday the baseball softball concept public workshop, pretty well attended, almost 30 people there. A lot of input, a lot of questions, a lot of feedback. The next step is to bring it before the Recreation Commission. We plan to send out an email to all the parents who participated in baseball softball last year, invite them to the meeting. Hopefully we get a robust turnout and a robust conversation around the topic, have Rec Commission deliberate in whatever manner they choose appropriate, and then move that forward to the city council, probably in November maybe. Then again, council can deliberate as they see appropriate and, move forward or ask questions or whatever may be your prerogative there. And then one other item so we will have a budget quarterly report at the October 7th meeting. So that'll be our kind of first quarter after the budget adoption. So we'll have that on the 7th as well.
Great. That's it? All right. Any other questions for staff before we move on? All right. Next up, we have matters presented from the audience. The public may address the city council on any item that is on the agenda at the time the item is called. The public may also address the city council on any item not on the agenda that is within the subject matter of the city of Escalon. Each speaker is limited to a maximum of 5 minutes. Unused time may not be yielded to another speaker. You may state your name and address for the record. However, it is not required. Due to state law, action will not be taken on an item that is not on the agenda, and except for brief responses, the council is prohibited from discussing any item not on the agenda. If it requires action, it will be referred to the staff and/or placed on a future agenda. The determination of whether an item is within the subject matter of the city is a discretionary decision made by the mayor. And with that mouthful, we open up to the floor here. If you guys got anything, you're welcome to the podium.
Kurt Danziger, Mr. Mayor, Council. Question on Murphy Ranch. I was going to bring it up. I realize this is an application and you're going to have back and forth with Murphy Ranch as you review it. Can you give us any kind of situation that is stalling this out, that they're having to upgrade before you can bring that to a town hall or a meeting with the public?
Yeah, I wouldn't say any delay necessarily. I think it's been important to us and to the public to bring it to a community workshop prior to any decisions being made. I understand they have a number of projects going on. They're a small crew, and they want to make sure they have their plan dialed in per their parameters before they bring it out to the community. They don't want to get to the community, have a lot of questions, and then not be able to answer those questions, at least from their purview. So no necessarily delay. It's not like we've asked for anything. It's just, they're going a little slower than I believe they initially intended.
I was curious because they have submitted an application and they expected the city to review it and make comments, approve it, whatever.
Yeah.
And then we were told that there was additional addendum to that application, that's what was holding it back at this point. I don't know what those were. Maybe you can tell us what they were, but it seems like when somebody sends in an application, they're pretty much saying this is what we want to do and this is it. Unless you've commented on it prior to, or anybody's commented on it, it would seem that it'd be pretty straightforward. They could, present that. Yeah. People out there are wondering.
Yeah.
And we're hearing a little bit of stall. It's not a stall, but it sounds like that. It's a perception out in the public that, maybe they're gun shy, they don't want to bring this up. We don't know, but that's what happens when people are in the dark. They're mushrooms.
The project's not shovel-ready. The property's not annexed yet.
Well,
It's got to go through LAFCO. It's going to be a
when you
while.
bring forth an application, you're saying this is it, we're shovel-ready. And unless somebody's got an objection to any of it, then that's what you review and that's what you approve or not approve. So that's why we're bringing it up. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody online that had any comments or questions?
Be online.
Nobody on? Well, at this point, we are going to close matters presented from the audience and move on to administrative matters. Item 7, introduce and receive proposals for the installation and managed operations of wireless network internet service.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So quite a background on this. We'll go through it slowly, and we are joined by John Morris with Spark Alliance, who has helped the city with the latest RFP effort. So he will be here for questions. But I'll kind of walk through this a little bit. It started with, sort of poor internet connection at some of our remote sites, Corporation Yard and wastewater treatment plant. Seeking to upgrade that, city went out for an RFP, 2023, I believe, 2023, just to improve the internet quality at those remote sites. At that time, the idea was to leverage the vertical assets we have, the tower at the police department, and sort of, provide that space for either free or improved internet. We did have 2 applicants at that time, 2 proposers at that time, submit proposals. The council deliberated. There was some questions about the RFP, the process, the selection process, and council chose at that time to kind of pause, reset the conversation a little bit. City staff then recommended getting someone on board, or the council did. So we do now have Spark Alliance to kind of help us walk through the RFP, get it out of the hands of our in-house IT department, make it neutral, fair. And so since that RFP development, the proposals and the conversation has kind of mushroomed a bit in a positive way. Before you is 10 proposals in 4 different categories. We will walk through those. And this item in particular is intended to introduce, specifically stated in the subject line, introduce the proposals and then seek any further direction on next steps from the council. So no approval tonight necessarily, but we're going to introduce and then seek direction. So as we were going out into RFP, we realized that there was a couple of different project types or proposal types that may be viable for the city to explore. Again, our consultant, John, has kind of coordinated with potential proposers to realize some of those proposals. I will just read here. In the RFP, there was some specific objectives. Improve internet access, of course, that's where we started. Enhance connectivity as well. But we started to see some ancillary benefits. Perhaps promote economic development, support municipal services, and ensure compliance with any relevant regulations through the state or others. So as I mentioned, we did receive 10 proposals. One did not meet the criteria, wasn't sort of a full proposal. We have discarded that one. So 9 proposals over 4 different categories. They are on page 151 of the package, page 2 of this staff report. The first project type, the first proposal type was a project. The city pays some money, a company installs enhanced infrastructure, we get better service. The city is out upfront money for the equipment and then would have to pay for kind of ongoing operations, maintenance, other things. Since we felt we had better proposal types, this is not one that we necessarily spent a lot of time on, but there are 5 project proposals. So looking into the next 3 categories, we did receive a proposal from T-Mobile, obviously a nationwide, very big company that would ensure we have connectivity throughout the entire city. That is not only to our locations, both remote and sort of here at City Hall, but in between locations. This would provide, our remote employees, police, public works, others, better connectivity to our system. It would also provide, perhaps better connectivity for businesses and residents. That does come at a cost. It's a nominal cost, $25,000, and we'd still be paying for our internet. It'd be about $600 per month. You should note that our current charge for internet is about $880. So it is a savings. It is upfront cost, and we would have, good connectivity throughout the city, interconnectivity from a very reliable nationwide firm. The next proposal type came from 2 different local proposals. It is a no cost up front, so no cost for the equipment or infrastructure, and then no monthly rate. That means, in essence, the city would receive free internet, so we'd be saving that $880 a year, again, for use of our vertical assets, the tower at PD. Now, what we believe the proposers receive from that is access to, residents within the city or businesses within the city, and they can perhaps monetize that infrastructure by gaining customers. And then the last proposal type is the most unique, I would say. A big upfront cost, nearly $2 million, but the city would become the ISP. The city would become the internet service provider. So for the cost of $2 million, a significant amount of infrastructure would be installed, essentially creating a network like the T-Mobile, but not as advanced perhaps. And then the city is the actual provider. Like we provide water, sewer, other things, the city would actually be the provider, and any monetization from that would go to the city. In looking into this, we believe this would not go into the general fund. So any customers we were able to obtain, any revenue from those customers on a monthly, yearly basis, we believe would not go to the general fund, but would be created in an enterprise fund. And you can imagine how that'd be. So you have customers paying for a service. You want to ensure that there's continued investment in that service, and money isn't being utilized for other general fund items at the cost of potentially that service that is being provided to the customers. So very much like sewer and water in that regard. So those are the 4 category types. We can get into questions that the council and the public may have about those 4 types. And, again, it's really now up to the council's discretion on sort of how to move forward. If there's certain option types that you want to explore further, we can start pre-negotiations. If there's additional information that's required, we'll really leave it to you. And again, I'll just mention that we have John Morris to answer any technical questions that the council or the community may have.
We have questions here. Do we would like to open up to the,
I do.
what do we got?
On the
Option for T-Mobile. Jalen, I'm sorry. You had mentioned something about improved connectivity for potentially businesses. Was that correct? How would that impact local business? Or how could that impact local business?
So in more of an indirect way, there are certain tiers of internet providers. T-Mobile is obviously a tier 1 provider nationwide. They're not going anywhere. They will continue to invest in their service. The other proposal types are likely coming from, tier 2, and that is nothing against them. They're just not T-Mobile, right? And so there's a certain reliability, not strictly from how reliable your internet is, but from the company overall. So that's what I was referring to, and John may have more information on that as well.
Can you elaborate on that, John?
Yep.
So there's probably a couple perspectives in that. You would have essentially the ability for all businesses in the city limits or beyond the city limits, essentially having direct, immediate internet access in relationship or contrast to wired solutions. So, for example, with T-Mobile, they don't have necessarily the architecture that like a Spectrum or maybe an AT&T that basically has land-based wire, whether it's whatever media that they use, fiber, copper, etc. High-speed wireless internet essentially can reach anything that has an antenna. So if you don't have infrastructure that goes to a business physically, you can still provide internet service to companies that might be challenged today. Small historical example for you guys would be a lot of companies used as far as businesses, used a service called HughesNet from years back that was kind of one of the original satellite and wireless type providers that was able to reach areas that other businesses that were outside of those wired infrastructures were able to get an alternative internet connection. The other thing is it makes it market competitive as well, having wired and wireless solutions, so it could actually drive costs and cost benefits down to the businesses as well. The ability to actually potentially increase their speeds, there's kind of future benefit in that in terms of people that are running their businesses today. Obviously, most do electronic data transactions, so they're doing things on computer, over the internet, etc. In some cases, some businesses work, for example, off of like their mobile phone connection, or maybe a single device, or even at home to do some business. And then if they have the option to do higher speed internet, as technologies progress, you have more and more services over one wire, more or less, or wireless. And so their ability to potentially have larger capacities does contribute to their ability to process more, do more, etc. Could contribute to the growth of their business, and that's obviously per business and their ambitions and whatnot. But there just are multiple perspectives that can be looked at, and I'll spare diving into the details and the deeper level conversation about how that would translate dollar to dollar or expansion or whatever. But essentially, there are plenty of businesses that would have that concept of large company, large, presence, right, as their service goes, and the ability to have some competitive options that would potentially drive down costs, if nothing else.
So, just to help me understand a little bit better, appreciate everything you were saying, but if I have a business here in town and I'm currently using T-Mobile wireless for my internet connection, by adding this proposal to the city, does that improve my connectivity as a business, or am I ultimately just, it's the same, nothing's really changed for me?
I understand what you're saying. So no, as a provider as being T-Mobile, no, there would be no competitive advantage because they are a nationwide provider that already has presence here and it's already essentially selling and serving service.
Okay.
So yeah, the only thing you would have there is the potential of increased customer base that might drive down costs would probably be the one thing that might be there is the more people subscribe.
Okay, but no additional hardware or anything that are gonna increase bandwidth or speeds, it's not?
No, it gets simpler, I guess, in one sense. right? You'd have the ability to have a lot of reduction in maybe, the different options, because a lot of companies now, so I guess there still is a cost reduction perspective, because you could have it where if there's incentive for the city residents to go after preferred providers, if you will, right, whoever that may be, it could be consolidation of providers also, right? There are people out there that have multiple different, companies that are providing service, that if they consolidate, there'd be a cost reduction model in that.
There was a mention of $25,000. Can we come back to that for T-Mobile? What was that for?
For basically connecting into their network that they already have throughout the city.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So when I look at proposal 1 versus 2, 2 obviously seems like it's more potentially in our favor as far as just looking at it in general terms. So is there a big drop-off in service or some sort of game-changing difference between 1 and 2 that would make us say, want to go with 1 versus 2, or the other, hypothetically?
And just to reset, so 1 is T-Mobile.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm
and-
sorry.
Okay, yeah.
1 is T-Mobile, the other 2 would be the proposals from Iera and EasyWave, because it looks to me like there's the potential to do revenue share and potential, it's out of cost, no monthly rates, so it potentially could be a win-win scenario. So for us, however, what is the difference there between, now does that mean you're partnering in something that's more inferior? Or is it is 1 more of a superior approach? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That's what I'm getting
and
at.
I'll try to speak to it on that level. You actually beat me to it with establishing which proposals in order. So T-Mobile, for example, if that's the first, right? What you are establishing there is absolutely a competitive, robust technology, right? I mean, they're investing in the top-notch stuff because their direct competitors are also tier 1 providers, right? National and maybe even larger. So if you consider some of those larger companies being competitors, the companies that are more regional or local definitely are going to have probably comparable technologies, but maybe not necessarily the scale or robustness as some of the technologies that come from the larger companies. So for example, if you drive around, you see those towers that look like, Christmas trees more or less with antennas all over them. And also the big cinder block generator facilities that are right next to most of those towers as you drive down the road. There's a lot of investment for that kind of as a standard solution, whereas some of the tier 2 provider solutions will be kind of like a hybrid combination of using the vertical assets as shared as opposed to their own standalone with their own space, their own land, their own permitting, or leasing land. But it's essentially self-contained infrastructure, right, where it's all them and them alone. In the tier 2 model, some of the technologies rival the larger providers, but it's just not going to be as many antennas throughout the region. It's not going to be necessarily the robustness of redundant power. You might have shared power with different buildings, resources, facilities. There's a lot of co-op and revenue share in that respect. Small examples would be towers and tall buildings with various companies that the tier 2 providers will approach and say, can we just lease this space and put our stuff on your assets in your building, which means it is a collaborative co-op type of a thing, as opposed to this is our space, we service this, we can access it at all times without disrupting anything else. And it's kind of a separator in that respect.
Can you put it in like second grade language? So are we talking like when I'm sitting at the table, right, and I have this thing in my hand, is it going to be dramatically different from that standpoint?
So if the immediate service performance, so the reason I went a little bit onto the technical side is just so that it's aware that those things exist. But
I didn't mean any
here-
disrespect by that.
No, that's okay, that's okay. I just know that there'll be plenty of people that want to understand that part of it at least.
Yeah.
And believe me, that's not deep level. So for whatever it's worth, the performance side of it, right, and just trying to keep it simple, if the technology is up and running and you're actually using the service, would you differentiate a tier 1 provider from a tier 2 provider in actual usage of your devices, internet service, et cetera. No, because I mean, the sciences are standard. So you would not necessarily see any difference in your usage of things. It would be more in the event of what happens when something goes wrong. That's typical of tech and IT, right? Everything is quiet, it just works. You don't really know how, and you don't know the complexity or lack of complexity in the deliverable, right? The mechanism, if you will.
Or up and down
Gotcha.
speeds the same, because that's what it sounds like you're saying. So if I get gig speeds from T-Mobile, I'm going to get gig speeds from.
Correct. But will you get gig speeds at scale or at stability is probably more the question about sizing of those companies and providers, meaning you might have 5 regional towers that if one fails, 4 can still pick things up, as opposed to another provider that might have 1 tower. If that fails, that entire area is basically dead.
What kind of issues have we had in the past with the current provider? Have we had much issue currently? I know we're looking to improve and they're looking to put towers up and stuff, but
Yeah.
stuff on our towers, but
I think it's less about the provider and more about the technology at this
Yeah.
point, currently. And so, I mean, I think that's the answer to that question in particular. And just to reset Mayor Pro Tem's question, so if one costs, month over month, and there's an outlay, and one is free, is there a reason not to go with the free one? Is there a technical benefit, right, to not go with the free one? So I want to make sure we got that answer. I want to make sure.
No, yeah, that's what I was getting at. I was just trying to make sure we're comparing apples to apples in some way, or like, is it a Fuji apple,
Yeah.
versus something else? I don't know.
And I guess to keep it on that perspective, there's probably apples, oranges, and bananas. So you're gonna have kind of 3
A lot
different,
different.
right. And the only way I can try to keep it simple and still use the correct terminology is you've got wired solutions, and you've got kind of 2 different wireless solutions. So one wireless solution is basically what they call line of sight, which means as the crow flies from point A to point B, and if anything's in the way or in the middle, it can disrupt things. And there's non-line of sight solutions, which just means it's a spider web, right? So you have different ways that things can get places without having to be a direct A to B type of a connection. So those line of sight versus non-line of sight versus wired is kind of is top levels we can get as far as what the tech availability is.
I guess I had my question here for just the council here, or maybe I guess just ask Jalen. So we have confirmed that we did the ISP proposal for $2 million. That's an enterprise fund? So there's no way we can make any money and monetize this. It's going to cost us a lot of money to run this as an ISP, and I don't see where that's a benefit at all to the city to run our own process, to dump $2 million investment into something that we can't monetize and make any revenue on. And we have to maintain and have infrastructure to do that to continue servicing our customers. That's just one more thing we don't need to do, in my opinion anyways.
Yeah, I had thought about that quite a bit and thinking about it, and
I haven't found the benefit.
when Councilman Sean and I were looking into this with the stuff that had been brought to us prior, and more I thought about it, the more I felt the same way.
Mr. Mayor,
I would,
sorry, go ahead, you go first.
just to make a comment on
Please.
that. There are some benefits in that fund would take care of things like technology for our public works and for our police, so that fund would cover that. It would cover the cost to hire those who need to our maintenance workers for that. And then there would be other, if I'm correct, sorry, I would think that would come out of this fund as well. So there are some, from what I understand, some increases that we'll get for our staff here.
Yeah, I'll just say in general terms, I mean, benefits, I'm not saying they're good or bad, right? Benefit is you could provide it as a social service. So, you're providing low-cost internet to the residents of the city of Escalon, maybe at cost or whatever, right? So there's some social benefit there. Enterprise funds, Yes, while it is in an enterprise fund, there's certainly some bleed over where there's a nexus, where it makes sense to general fund staff, general fund equipment, because, you know, it's hard to differentiate a police officer just to an enterprise fund or a public works crew just to an enterprise fund versus, you know, when we have a small crew and they're also mowing lawns and, you know, doing arrests, right? So
I mean, I think the concept is interesting. What I've been trying to wrap my head around is how do you mitigate the risk of it potentially?
I would have to see some build out on how many customers you need, how many businesses you need, what kind of revenue you can expect if you're a provider, what would that revenue look like, and how do you cover a $2 million cost to a city right now that's on a budget issue right now to expend money? Right now for us, I mean, if we were swimming in money, it might be different, but I'm definitely afraid of dropping 2 million with whatever benefits there are to this.
As a I agree with you. I would personally keep it in mind moving forward in a few years down the road if we do have that extra money. The benefit more for this that I see is an independence, where you're creating an independence for the city outside of outward government entities and then corporate entities. You kind of have control over who gets benefits. Maybe we want to have a discount for certain, you know, for seniors or for this or that. Like, we'll be able to control that price structure and we'll be able to control just a little bit more and have that independence.
I think it'd be interesting to, like, you know, investigate it and see, is there an angle where you can make it, you know, not put ourselves so far out there on a limb? Like, if it was myself, I'd probably take the risk, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if I'm looking at it from like a standpoint of a very conservative approach, you got to find that angle, I think, to justify it. And I've been kind of racking my brain with that too, and I think it has to be probably investigated deeper, like the mayor's saying, to find out what are those, you know, how many potential people would actually use the service, you know, that kind of stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
folks, just for running some quick calculations, at $2 million times our population, you're considering every single resident, every man, woman, and child in Escalon would have to pay $269.36 a month to pay back that investment of $2 million.
In 1 year.
Yeah, that's 1 year. You spread it across 5 years, obviously it goes down, but
Yeah, but we know that we're talking rooftops and businesses, that's it, not population. And then there's some people that are happy with where they're at, you're not gonna get 100% coverage. So you gotta figure out those numbers before you even risk a biscuit like $2 million, in my opinion. I don't think we're in a position to put any kind of risk like that right now. I see some benefits to that, I'm not knocking it, but right now, I don't think it's even remotely close to the right time to consider with the size of our town, and I want to keep it small. I don't want to have to have more people to support a venture like this.
I would agree, and if we start looking at management, the management aspect of it, if the internet were to go down now, it's the city's fault. I can only imagine, you know, the flood of calls that would come in, my internet's not working, I'm unable to process charges, I can't do my homework, I can't, that just sounds like a fiasco. And I agree with the ROI portion. I mean, we don't see anything here. If it was well presented and showed that there was an actual way to make money and it made sense for the city, then I think it justified or warranted a deeper dive. But the way that it sits kind of right now, if we were looking at crossing some of these off, that's the first one to go.
Well,
May I?
oh, I'm sorry, go for it.
Oh, well, this goes into the enterprise fund. We did talk about the 2 no cost, no monthly rate proposals that have the option for revenue sharing. Do those also create their own enterprise fund, or is that more of a general fund, if that was something that we were able to do?
I believe that would be a general fund.
That would be a general fund income? Okay.
That's what I was trying to figure out was, you know, could we potentially have something, well, obviously it wouldn't be on the same scale, but some sort of revenue share there, and end up having no out-of-pocket, and in theory have a service that's pretty comparable to a T-Mobile locally, I guess is what I'm looking at in my own head. And your feeling is that short of like a major company like a Google or something, right, where they need like massive data, it would be pretty comparable. I guess what I'm trying to get at is is how dramatically different is the service? Like, are we talking about a major difference between 1 and 2?
I think what he said is that the service of it,
It's
the
different.
serviceability is not the difference. The difference is the redundancy. So T-Mobile,
Yeah.
because their national company comes with multiple redundancies, whereas Aera and EasyWave, they may have 2 towers, whereas T-Mobile has 50 towers in the area. Is that correct?
That makes sense.
Sure, I mean, and I can keep it as narrow or broad as you guys want to understand it. And for the narrow side of it, what you're looking at for sure is more resources, probably a stronger SLA. You know, for the service level agreement means that, you know, when their outages happen, they're probably able to throw resources at it more effectively if it's a larger issue. Just the ability to have the stronger, larger company. But on the flip side, if I'm being a consultant and neutral here, the tier 2 providers will also be highly motivated to try to grow, build, and expand in these markets that these other competitors already exist, right? I mean, they're ultimately trying to gain market share. So in effect, you might not have the T-Mobile, you know, I guess redundancies and structure, but a lot of companies that are trying to grow into these markets will be aggressively trying to construct something similar. And I guess to the point, would probably be at a perspective of potential revenue share discussions or negotiations. You know, you might have some, because T-Mobile's just too big, right? They're not going to discuss anything with you guys. They're like, we're already here. We can sell direct. So.
I guess the other question that comes with option 2, I guess, is as Mayor Pro Tem is saying, the no monthly rate with our 2 local vendors. One, they're local vendors. I like maybe a selection between local vendors, one to keep local if we could. But if we were to do something like that, they're going to put equipment on our property, if our towers, vertical assets as you call them. If down the road, how's this contract work if in 2 years, we're just not happy with the service, we had no money up front, we're not having a monthly bill, maybe not on the revenue share, that's to be decided later. How do you pull the plug? What's the out on these things? What are we committed to? What's the downside to that?
Service level agreement part of it.
I mean, that's one of the things too. They're putting equipment on there. If we decide to walk away, we allowed to tell them to yank the equipment? Or at this point, we're not providing that service, so now you're using our tower, so now it turns into you pay us X amount a month for the privilege of renting our tower space. That obviously wasn't discussed in any of that. I don't know if there was an out in any of these contracts. T-Mobile, obviously, month to month after you jump in, I'm assuming you can pull the plug and walk away. They're national. There's no long-term commitment with them.
Before you answer that question,
Sure.
can I ask, I have a similar question on top of that.
Yeah.
So when you wrote the RFP, what is the city's off-ramp for, as the mayor indicated, a year, 2, 3 from now, the city's or the service is just absolutely horrible? What's the plan that we can get out of the contract?
Do you want to tag team it?
Yeah,
or-
I'll start. So we are, and these are great questions. We're at the proposal stage, right? We don't have a contract. We haven't, began negotiations. We are providing what we think can be derived, what they said specifically, and what we think can be derived from each of these proposals. So, the council could direct us to start, exploring one option or a couple options. Then we would get into those discussions. Contracts, agreements are two-way streets. They would have to have, equal benefit or at least want to participate in the agreement. And we could both try to, gain as much as possible from each other. So with council direction, if there are these, thoughts of off-ramps and, canceling, then we can incorporate that into our pre-negotiations and our negotiations as we bring a contract forward. The next step will be to bring a contract forward with one company or a couple, and then we can go through the specifics of that contract at that time.
No other questions, John? I'm sorry, did that answer your question, Mr.
No, I'm good.
Mayor?
I'm good.
Okay. Second question is, technology, as soon as you put it in place, it's already outdated. I remember when I thought dial-up was the coolest thing since sliced bread, and yeah. But anyways, so in the T-Mobile proposal and in the, what do we call it, 1 and 2, if you will, the IERA and Easy Wave. 4 years from now, the technology just goes through the roof. And which one of these do you believe has best options for the city to upgrade the technology? You know, because I'd hate to get in a situation where, yeah, it's no cost, no monthly rate, and the city's on dial-up and something else is going with major high-speed connection. So which would give the city a better opportunity to upgrade the service?
That's probably a pretty level playing field question. Pretty explicitly in the RFPs, it's discussed that if they're going to offer those type of things, that it's their responsibility to maintain that architecture, right? So it's not a cost to you guys in that respect, whether it was T-Mobile or options 1 and 2 in the second set of options, because T-Mobile inherently is going to maintain their architecture, right? Maintain, I guess, market competitiveness, but so are the other providers. So the reality is that the technologies themselves almost force the issue. To your point, things progress so fast that you hit capacity levels that, fortunately, with modern technologies, you can watch and be proactive about. So you can actually see growth trends, you can see the usages, you can see the usages over time, and then effectively companies start, you know, it's just adding more pipe for water, right? It's real simple. You need more water volume, you need more water pipe. So in that respect, there's kind of a overall public SLA that's given, they have to kind of abide by because of market competition just as much as consumer expectation. The second piece of the puzzle is the RFP specifically for you guys. It's written as such where they have to have at least a 5-year commitment. There's also an SLA guarantee for speed minimums and the overall maintenance and support in terms of timeframes, performance metrics. I'll spare you all the details of that, but those are all things that are asked and requested to maintain a certain class of service minimum so that it is usable for an extended period of time. But in just inherent what technology, to your point, hasn't evolved or progressed out of necessity. I mean, if an ISP basically runs into a bottleneck or can't perform, there's going to be multiple providers. People can jump because of no contract situations. The market perpetuates the market.
And I'll just add on to that. I think there's nothing that we've seen so far that would say one company is ahead of the other. These are private businesses with private ownership. We can't see down the road, nor probably can they, about who's going to invest and who's not going to invest. I do think a benefit to this proposal type, and we do have a backstop here, is they're trying to gain customers. The hope is if they're trying to gain customers, they're continuing to invest in their service. And so that is, you know, sort of a natural backstop we have.
The last question, and I don't know if the city attorney can discuss the legalities of this, but for the citywide connectivity proposal, obviously there are other firms out there besides T-Mobile. You have Verizon, you have Starlink, there's many, many different firms, but obviously T-Mobile was the only one that took the time to respond to the RFP. But if the council chooses to do a comparison of the citywide connectivity proposal and the no cost, no monthly rate, are we allowed to look at what those other companies could provide to the city? Starlink and Verizon and Spectrum, all the other ISPs.
Yeah, I mean, the city council has a lot of discretion how we want to move forward. You'd probably need to do, in some sense though, you do have to do a modified version of what you've already done, targeting just those providers that could do citywide connectivity. Because I don't know how you can get an apples to apples comparison unless they're going to submit a proposal. I don't know how you look at it, right? Unless you define what the terms are that you're looking at. So, for example, that could be a version of the direction that the council gives tonight. Hey, we like the idea of citywide connectivity, but we want staff to circle back and make sure there's any last calls for any other providers that are interested. And that could be a version of the direction given tonight.
And I like all these options. I just wanted and I'm not an internet geek by any means, but everybody that I'm hearing talking these days is Starlink is the latest and greatest thing, and the technology that Starlink provides other ISPs can't even match. So, I mean, it's up to the direct discretion of the council, but I think we should, if it sounds to me like the city as the ISP might be off the table at this time. But if the council agrees to it, I think it would be worth it to at least do an apples-to-apples comparison of the T-Mobiles and all the other firms that we've just mentioned. Those are my questions.
Right, I could give you guys a simple concept in the marketplace. It's called community broadband. It's basically what a lot of municipalities have been doing and moving towards. That happens pretty much internationally. So that is something for you guys to explore, whether it's future, you know, I guess present. But community broadband as a whole is kind of a marketplace in itself for underserved communities, underserviced communities, meaning that they don't have any service at all. A small example would be I'm actually working with all the 5 counties up in the motherlode basically for what they define as middle mile internet, trying to get things from wireless and wired and kind of close that gap. And there's plenty of grants and government funding that's going around for that stuff because of things like No Child Left Behind, things where you have it so that school districts get involved with cities and they start working on co-ops and what have you, you know, getting internet and private secure connectivity to the home for education. I mean, most businesses are already there and understand internet, but schools are still kind of maturing and evolving in terms of like, you know, using mobile devices or Chromebooks, if you will, those kind of things. A small example would be not necessarily at the scale that we're talking about, but Salida Unified School District actually has a private kind of wired and wireless network for all of their 6 different campuses to provide internet to all the children. So as they jump from, say, you know, elementary to middle school to high school, et cetera, that you're effectively moving on a private network and always have access to all of your your context education programs. And it makes it so that you know that you're not floating around the public internet when you're accessing educational resources. So there's different things that can evolve and mature, right? And it just comes down to each city's probably perspective, ambitions, discussions, you know, investigations.
I certainly don't want to blow this thing out of the water, but there may, in a town the size of Escalon, it may behoove us to talk to our other public service entities, the fire department and the school district. I mean, we may be able to get an even cheaper rate if we say, okay, if the council decides T-Mobile's the way to go, T-Mobile, here's 3 large public entities in the town of Escalon. What's the best rate that you can give us?
My perspective in all this as the consultant is really, you guys have a lot of leverage as the entire city being the asset. And I think this kind of evolved or mushroomed from being, you have a few vertical assets, but that's not the case. You as a city are an asset. And so to your point, there's so many market competitors that are stepping into the arena everywhere, right? It's kind of leveling the playing field there. And there's a lot of acceptance in municipality and tax and state that understand all of these, you know, I guess mediums as internet service and what that really brings to the overall interactions and operations of daily life. So I could give you many examples, but there are a lot of examples out there where that community broadband concept is effectively kind of a movement in a lot of different municipalities, cities, states, et cetera. So.
Off the wall question, how tall of a tower do you have to put one on that, for our towers? How high are we going up to put something on? If they were to attach to our tower, how high in the air would they be?
Kind of a loaded question, because there is that kind of conversation about line of sight versus non-line of sight. Depending on that technology, it would be, you know, what do you have as, are things in the way, right? If you have things that are in the way, then you might have to go more vertical. If you have things that are you know, you can redirect or bounce different directions, then maybe you don't have to go so vertical. So
I'm not just thinking of the PD tower, I'm thinking we have, just trying to figure out how high. We have light towers at Hogan. School district has light towers on top of a tall hill at the back of the stadium. I'm just trying to figure out how high you need to go if we were depending on which way we wanted to go with things to network with our other partners in town.
Just height becomes less of an issue with that non-line of sight technology. right? Because there are plenty of cities right now that have public works basically using all the street lights, the city lights, the signal lights, et cetera, right? All those, you have vertical assets all over the place. And so you can put equipment all throughout and create this mesh, which creates that kind of a inexpensive redundancy, if you will, because you could have multiple nodes or units go out and you still have all the service functional at a high percentage. So, it's kind of that, hive mentality, more or less with technology these days.
With the citywide connectivity option, would we be able to abandon our cellular connections and be able to move to a wireless connection through T-Mobile? So for like VoIP or also for internet phone calls from your cell phone. So there's a potential savings there. Who's our current carrier for our cellular devices, and approximately how many do we have?
We do have GoTo, which is what we're using here. And they're charging us for so many units. Each one of these computers, each phone inside the office, every little tiny plastic asset you can think of, they're charging us something for it, every phone line. And then we have another company that we also have the $886 a month wireless program through, and it escapes me. It's a 3-letter name. It's not AT&T or one of those big ones, but it's a...
Is that all just for our VoIP? Is that not for our cellular?
So for the PD side, we use FirstNet, AT&T FirstNet. That's for, we have patrol phones. We have 10 of them. And then in our patrol cars, we use cellular modems, and they all have FirstNet SIM cards, and there are 8 of those in service.
That's
so at
probably...
the PD, we have about 18 cell connections. I want to say 10 phones. Actually, no, because then we got 2 records. I want to say we have 12 phones and then 8 just data for the patrol vehicles.
On FirstNet, I mean, it gives you priority over like data transfer and stuff, so we probably don't want to mess with that, right? We want to leave that alone and not let anybody else.
It would probably, especially if we were to go with like Aera or EasyWave, so our Axon dash cameras, all the data is transmitted via cellular, so we'd be loading up their infrastructure with just gigs of data on a daily basis. It's all going over the internet.
Do you know if T-Mobile offers FirstNet, or is it just AT&T?
Just AT&T.
How's
And
this?
we have Public Works and staff has some cell phones.
Public Works has FirstNet as well.
FirstNet as well. So that's still needs to stay in place on top of what we're currently looking at, right? Is that correct?
That's probably a question to ask those providers, right? Because I know that there are some competition out there trying to compete with the AT&T FirstNet, and so it would be something that might even be potentially cost savings, in that respect, if it's consolidation and just having where you got priority services, right? So I would agree that looking into those providers and essentially seeing if that's an option. I know that there are a few different providers that are large that are doing that kind of thing in other cities. So, T-Mobile absolutely qualifies as one of those. Outside of that, if it was something where it was your own internet service, and you guys would make yourself priority, right? So,
How's the service been with AT&T for Public Works and PD?
Cell phone service with AT&T is great, but the internet right now with our SCADA system, that's why I sure hope we can make a decision quick, because it's horrible and it's hindering.
Okay.
John, if you had to run your business solely off of T-Mobile's connectivity or Aera or EasyWave, which would you pick?
put it on my business, I'd probably be forced with what I do to go to the biggest provider.
Thank you.
Well,
Does this go to the public?
that's where I was trying to go. If we're done here, I'm going to like to open up to the public here. If they've got questions for John or any of us on this topic. Looks like we got some volunteers to come up to the podium.
All right, I got a lot of questions, but first of all, this city is nowhere near prepared to become its own internet service provider. Just some of you are new faces from last year when we had this discussion. I do have 25 years of experience in the telecommunications industry. I worked on building AT&T's fiber infrastructure in the state of California and Nevada, including having to maintain it. I also worked for a couple other competitive local exchange carriers after my career with AT&T, so I'm pretty well versed in most all of it. I do have a few questions. Are these synchronous connections that we're getting, that IERA and EasyWave and T-Mobile, they're synchronous, yes? How fast?
We've asked for minimums based on the city's request at 500 meg.
500 meg minimum? Okay. So confirming they are synchronous on all the proposals, correct? Even T-Mobile?
Yeah,
It seems a little,
It was a standard request for everyone to be able to provide that.
it seems a little unusual for T-Mobile to commit to that synchronous connection.
For whatever it's worth, they did site surveys and they're at 1.2 gig throughout the city.
Throughout Escalon, how many antennas do they have?
I don't know that exactly, but I know they have at least 3 towers in perimeter.
So one of the things I did, obviously, for a living was network infrastructure. I installed, fiber switches at cell sites for every single cellular carrier you could ever imagine, including T-Mobile. And they certainly do that, but especially T-Mobile uses AT&T's fiber backbone. They lease fiber strands from AT&T to get to their cell towers. Then their base radio is essentially, wireless from the little antennas they put at the top of the tower, right? So they're still using AT&T's infrastructure, as are most carriers in this area, because they are the incumbent local exchange carrier. That makes sense. However, one other question I would have for him is, do any of these companies have any redundant providers? Do they only rely on AT&T for that infrastructure, or do they have another carrier such as Charter Communications or somebody else that's able to provide internet?
So I know some and more depending on each provider. IERA has, I believe, 8 providers as exchange points to their data centers in downtown Modesto. I know of AT&T and I believe redundant satellite. I'm not 100% sure about EasyWave. They didn't actually provide that. Mobile, obviously, you've already kind of broken down.
So IERA has their own data center in downtown Modesto.
Fremont also.
And Fremont. Let's just take the Modesto part for the sake of simplicity here, but most all of the direct internet access to the outside world is going to go from here to San Jose, or maybe Sacramento, or Los Angeles ultimately. So whoever's network, IERA doesn't own that portion of the network. IERA would lease a fiber strand from, say, AT&T to get from their data center downtown Modesto to one of the major hubs where there would be core direct internet access routers for the big ISPs. So IERA actually does have a unique capability because they're right down the street from another major carrier, Lumen. Lumen Technologies used to be CenturyLink. They have a facility also on 13th Street. It's down the street from AT&T's own facility there. So IERA can have the ability to link through several different direct internet access carriers, which I think is a bonus. EasyWave, I would have loved for them to attend and answer some of these questions, but I doubt it. I'll touch a little bit on EasyWave. I did have some customers working with another carrier that I worked with out of Stockton that had some mutual customers on EasyWave, and we did have to work with EasyWave for problems on their network regarding voice over IP. The customers of ours that were voice over IP, and they were not really, let's just say, favorable to work with. Now, on the flip side of that, we also had customers, we had actually more customers that were on IERA's network, and IERA was much more pleasing to deal with from that perspective. If one of our customers was having transmission issues, called IERA, they were pretty good actually about working with us as another carrier and troubleshooting their portion of the network so we could figure out what was going on. So That's just my experience. It's real world experience. Take it for whatever you want. But this city is not prepared to do its own ISP. You're just not. Trust me on that. You're 10 plus years down the road from that. So think of the future, great, but for the sake of, getting the city's network so we can monitor the water pumps and all that stuff, you're going to need to move a lot quicker than that will take you.
Can I ask you a
for
quick
this
question?
project. Yes.
If you were sitting in my seat, which would you go with?
IERA.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
I would skip, the only reason I would skip T-Mobile is because they are another national carrier. And if you haven't experienced issues with AT&T from your existing services, now separate this for the sake of the discussion, AT&T wireless from AT&T's, whether it's landline internet service, landline phone service, fiber internet or whatever. Forget the cellular part of AT&T. You guys probably know by now that AT&T is not very favorable towards some of your lines you're using to monitor the water pumps. You're probably using DSO analog, 56K, I'm guessing. And AT&T just wants to throw that away. They just want to toss you by the wayside. Their fiber is quite a bit better than any
You
other
gotta wrap up,
service.
Stephen, we're getting out of time on
I know,
that.
their service is quite a bit better on their fiber. However, in this area, and IERA could probably attest to that if they were here, that they do have issues with AT&T's fiber in the Stockton area because it gets cut on a weekly basis. That does affect us. That used to affect the PD. I don't know if it's still
Every now and again.
doing that. But essentially, AT&T has no desire to fix that correctly. And that's why I wanted to really push on making sure that if we do anything with any of these providers, whether it's IERA, EasyWave, T-Mobile, that we have redundancy from the tower to the rest of the world. That we got to make sure that they do not rely on one sole provider, and that either way, they got to use somebody who has a separate network. So in Escalon, AT&T is the major incumbent local exchange carrier here. But then you have a cable company, Charter Communications. Charter has a totally separate network than AT&T. So I don't know if that's something, but that's something for you guys to think about. I'll quit yapping about it.
Anybody else?
Good evening. I'm going to come from a non-technical answer. I have T-Mobile. But like you said, nothing's going to change, and I don't see them lowering the price. What I do see is that if I ever have to call somebody, they're not here. Area's here. I can guarantee if you have a problem, they live here. They're not going to, slump you off or call you back in 2 days or several hours. You can probably know where they live and get it taken care of pretty fast, kind of like bugging this guy for city problems, right? It's just something to consider. As a consumer and as a small town, I would hope that we would really support our local businesses and local control. And I think you would get better service if you do something local. And if you don't like them, that's going to affect their business here. It's going to affect their relationship with our town, with our individuals, with the rest of us wanting to get service from them. So I think you're going to get a better service, a better value. And for heaven's sakes, we just passed a balanced budget. Now you're going to have extra money. Okay, just my own, little thoughts. It's past my bedtime, sorry.
Thanks. Anybody else? All right, then bringing it back here for looking for some direction here to our staff.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Kind of inclined to really take a deeper dive into the citywide connectivity proposal and the no-cost monthly rate proposals. So kind of taking it from both directions. I agree with what Sherry said about our local businesses. We do like to keep things local. And so with a no cost, no monthly rate, kind of do some negotiations and then I would request when that is brought back to council, we not only hear from John, but we also hear from representatives from Aera and Easy Wave. But similarly to that, look at the citywide connectivity and talk to our other local groups, the school district, the fire department. I mean, maybe an even better way to try to save some money. So that's my suggestion.
Thoughts here?
I mean, I would like to personally look into number 2. I think that's probably the best short-term look. The citywide connectivity thing, we could probably look into, I think, as you bring those groups together over time. But getting them all organized, coordinated, sit down, have conversations, that can take a significant amount of time. And Public Works is obviously saying that it's something that's a problem now. So that's just my opinion.
But if they want the business, I mean, each of these large companies have a business representative. I think that, and John would know better than I would, but I'm assuming that their business agent would get on the phone pretty quickly if they knew that there was an opportunity to really service an entire community. That's just my opinion.
Walker?
Yeah.
I don't use AT&T, so.
The city.
I've had no problem with it. We were able to switch over to CalNet and reduce our AT&T cost by just $300 a line per month.
My contact with FirstNet is
Thank you.
excellent. I reach out to him. He no longer works with AT&T, but he was with the secondary company. But any problems I have, he answers them within the hour.
Back on topic here, Councilman Walker, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I would like to look further into the 2 no cost, no monthly rate proposals, and I would like to see I'd like the city to explore the rent and revenue sharing with these options and see what those come back with that, to see what those look like as well.
Councilman Engel?
Yeah, I like the citywide connectivity proposal. Like the idea of going with a larger provider that has, potentially a greater opportunity to service us in times of, in downtimes, as far as internet connectivity. Not a big fan of the Aera Easy Wave option. We keep referring to them as assets, like the antenna that's on top of the police station. Essentially, we're letting somebody make money off of our asset. I see that there's a potential for revenue sharing, but we don't know what that is. Essentially, we're boosting their business. And just from personal experience with, I won't name which one of those companies, I haven't had great experiences. So as far as service is concerned, so I would opt for T-Mobile. I don't think we necessarily need to go out. We put an RFP out. The people that were interested responded. We have an option. In my opinion, that's the direction we pursue.
Okay. Couple thoughts on citywide connectivity. I struggle with outlay of $2,500 and then we're still paying $600 a month. It's going to take us 7 years, give or take, to recover the cost of that $25,000. Right now with a tight budget, I'm not sure I really want to spend $25,000 just to change internet providers myself. That's a struggle for me. I'd have to hear more about benefits on that for that kind of an outlay out of a budget that's so tight right now, it's not even funny. The no cost, no monthly rate proposal, I'm also interested in that. They're 2 local providers. That being said, I think we need to definitely look at off-ramps for both of those proposals for as, okay, we use them a few years down the road. It's not working out. It just didn't work out. There's always T-Mobile. We can go back to them, call them. We can go from there if it didn't work out. I'm not worried about that. But if we do that, then I'd like to explore the option of if we bail out, what's our revenue share for them leaving their equipment on our tower, or do they take it and walk away? it's a benefit for the city, for those folks that are customers of those two companies, whichever one we went with, if we did that. So if we do have an off-ramp, they're going to pay rent on that tower. And then also I do want to explore revenue share options at the end if they do go on to our towers, because they are going to get a benefit from that. We get the benefit of no monthly rate, I get that, but I think there's going to be a bigger extended revenue share potential there, in my opinion. But a few things to explore. I think you guys got enough there to chew on the meat there on the
Yeah.
bun for a bit.
The only other thing I wanted to add, if we could, on number 2, would be to make sure we do have redundancy, like was mentioned earlier, with the AT&T versus, the other connection. I forget, what'd you say it was? Charter, that's Charter. To see if that's something that's included in this package and proposal.
If they go down half-assed and then come back up for us kind of thing, yeah.
So just so we're clear on what the direction is, I'm seeing three middle council members basically direct staff to reach out and look further based on the concerns and questions you've raised with the 2 no-cost options. One council member is saying he prefers the citywide connectivity proposal, and another council member saying is do both. So, I mean, if we're just going to go off that, the direction that Jalen's getting from the majority of the council is to explore the 2 no-cost proposals. So I'm just saying that back to you all, so it's very clear in what we're seeing from staff level, and we just want to make sure, you're good with that, even if you were the dissenting voice. I mean, is that good as far as what the direction from the majority you want?
Sounds like what we said.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we, honestly, there's nothing that says as a council, if we get that discussion with those 2 providers and we don't get back what we were hoping to hear back and we don't like the options, we can back it up, open it back up.
Absolutely.
So we're not lost on that.
You're just
We're
saying this is what you wanted them to do for now?
not- First exploration, yeah.
Okay.
And if everything works out, great. If it doesn't, we can backtrack to another line of thought, in my opinion.
Is this something you typically have a vote on and?
No, direction's fine.
We just go one direction, or is that what you're looking for?
Direction is totally fine on an item like this. It was just because there was a little bit of nuance amongst the 5 of you. I just wanted to make sure it was clear, because sometimes you get calls the next day and it's like, hey, I thought we were going to do this. And so I just wanted to make that clear, so you answered the question, so I appreciate it.
But if the majority of the council wants to look at the no cost, no monthly rate, I would request that when this item is brought back, we have representatives from IAR and EasyWave here.
Okay, thank you very much, John, for enduring our questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next administrative matter, item number 8, agenda item request to explore possibility of installing restrooms in City Park.
Hey. Thank you. So we do have a presentation here. At the August 5th, 2024 City Council meeting, Councilmember Walker, supported by consensus of the council, directed staff to, in essence, perform the necessary steps to explore the option of installing another restroom in a city park. Well timed. So the presentation we have in front of you is kind of that exploration. Okay. And so I will state up here, these are planning level concepts. All costs are estimates only. This is, not definitive costs, but we wanted to get some information in front of the council to.
Mark is all we need.
To weigh that, yes. All right. So the first slide, what we did is we just looked at the acreages of parks. So this is every park, basin, grass area essentially in the city, and the acreage. So you will see just below the thick line, highlighted in orange, Shadowwood, and then 2 above that in blue, Shadowwood Murphy. This will come into play later in the conversation, but if the Murphy Ranch project were to move forward, their current proposal is to expand the current Shadowwood Basin, tie those together, make that a larger park. So if the Murphy Ranch project moved forward, that would make that area 3.68 acres compared to the 2.41 now. So I just wanted to mention that. The thick line here is a bit arbitrary, but when we're looking at park size, we thought parks above 3 acres in size would be the most likely spots for a restroom. Those below certainly could, but they make the most sense in those 3 acres or above. So you look at Sanchez, Lease Park, newly named Lease Park, which is Brentwood, the new Shadowwood, Murphy, and then Main Street Park. So I want to look at this slide a little bit just to look at spatial distribution of any new restroom that went in. So this first slide sort of, quote option 1. In the bold red, non-dotted, that's Hogan Park. That's where an existing restroom is. That is the one restroom in a park that the city has. If the Murphy Ranch project moves forward, we are asking at this time that a restroom is installed in that new larger park, which is above 3 acres in size. And so you would have one sort of in the northwest side of town. I think there are 2 primary options that people would think of. This is where the most practices are. One of those options is Sanchez Park. That is in the dotted yellow there. So again, if you just look from a spatial distribution, we're not, suggesting you have to go this way, but spatial distribution, now you potentially, again, if Murphy Ranch is approved, you have 2 in relative close proximity. If we go to the next slide, if you were to move it to Brentwood, you have that spatial distribution east-west, one on the west side of town, one on the east side of town, one in the far north. Again, these are just looking, I'm not trying to advocate for an option or anything like that, just looking at where parks, restrooms could be located. So then we started to look into the cost. These are basic models. Of course, we could spend more by making it nicer materials or those types of things. But this is the same provider who put the new one relatively new in Hogan, so we had some context there. A single door, a single stall restroom, sort of a family, an all-gender restroom, is 135 to 148 installed. That is not including the trenching and infrastructure that we would have to put in that we will get to in a subsequent slide. So again, this is a single all-gender restroom, pretty basic, 135 to 148 installed, meaning that building. If you look at a double, so a men and women's restroom, so 2, I think it's funny, they highlight users per hour. So at the bottom, the 1 stall is 45 users an hour, the 2 stall is 90 users an hour. So, if you're looking at traffic and how many people will use the restroom, you would also figure that more even so than the gender side of it. So these, you can see about a $50,000 increase to add the second door, between 185 and 196 installed, again, not including the infrastructure. Dollars, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So then we looked at each park and where the restroom could be installed. So things we, thought about is, getting it offset from the street a little bit, locating it next to a playground, and then not too close to any residence. We also looked at where we could relatively easily trench. So, cutting a big line through the park with as minimal impact as possible. So you see here at Bob and Dean Elise Park, Brentwood Park, you have the proposed restroom just north of the playground here. It include a 2-inch water line and a 4-inch sewer line that's about 100 feet from the roadway. So if you look here at the cost, there's one cost associated with the open trench. That's about $70,000. So again, you'd add $70,000 to the, the park building, the restroom building. If you go to the next slide, the horizontal drill, so basically boring, instead of trenching, you're looking at $100,000. So next slide is looking at where it'd be located on Sanchez Park. Again, a 2-inch water line, a 4-inch sewer line, connecting into the 6-inch, both of those are 6-inch. It's also about 100 feet away from the roadway, and therefore you see very similar costs. It's also about $70,000. So all told, you're looking between $250,000 and $350,000 all in infrastructure and the restroom. So then we just looked at funding options. We do currently have about $72,000 available in recreation park, DIF, development impact fees. So every development that comes in pays their impact fees towards certain categories. We have about $72,000 left. We are currently researching grants. We have not come across a grant yet that would be applicable for this use. That does not mean we won't find one, but we are researching that. Of course, there is always the general fund option. I'm not suggesting that is a good option, but I'm bringing all options before you. And then we put donations, question mark, we don't know if we could get donations or anything like that, but certainly an option to explore down the road. So that is what we have looked into thus far in terms of the council member request to potentially bring a restroom to a new city park. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions to council level?
Now, I remember that the new bathroom at Hogan ended up, was that a grant that ended up paying for that? Is that?
A portion of it, yes.
A portion of it, and ended up coming in with that, right? Correct, okay.
And what was that grant?
I don't recall.
Okay. So that should be on the books, at least that's one direction, or one way to take a look at how we funded the last new bathroom that was installed.
Just on the cost right now, personally, take it off the table where I wouldn't even discuss this, worry about with our budget. It's not even financially feasible in my books. I may be too conservative on that mode, but we don't have the money right now to put a bathroom in a park. I think we should keep an eye on that and look for opportunities for funding, but unless it's fully funded somewhere, we don't have the money for that. I don't foresee that as an expense we've got covered in any way, shape, or form right now.
So, I agree. I do want to continue looking into, or keeping our eye out, looking into grants and other funding ideas, not into using our general fund for this at the moment. But it is something that would alleviate some of the other issues or recreation issues where we have games going far into the night, and so that we can utilize some of our other park resources. And then looking into the, thank you for both of the Lease Park, yeah, and then Sanchez Park. I know that they're putting a bathroom possibly into the new, tell me, the Shadowwood, okay? When looking at that particular park, I'm not seeing a lot of space to be able to utilize that for our recreation. I don't think it's very flat, it's not very square. As much as I appreciate that, unless the new expansion of that park is more square, I'm not seeing that as something that we're able to use for soccer or flag football utilization. But I do like the idea of Lease Park especially, but Lease and Sanchez are both viable parks for that use.
I mean, I would tend to agree with Mayor Dave. I think it's a good idea in theory, if we can find funding for it. But right now, we're kind of in a difficult spot financially, I think. So if you can find a grant or something, maybe it's an option. The other things I'd want to know too would be how much, like, the bathroom impacts law enforcement and public works. Is there any major concerns that, like, having to constantly deal with people over there, or is it pretty easy?
For Public Works, it's not a major issue, no.
Major issue?
Because we've always had one at Hogan,
So you
major
don't
issues.
foresee, say, hypothetically, having another bathroom being any kind of an extra problem? Chief, you feel the same way, or?
It's hard to tell. I mean, our officers are locking it at night. They do a security check over there, so it's not really that big of a deal.
So generally-
There are vandalism issues that pop up every now and again, but not significantly. Although Hogan Park is kind of in a main thoroughfare, so there's a lot of traffic. Bathroom at a smaller park, kind of more nestled into a residential. It's going to be more secluded. There is a possibility that you're going to have people going there because they think it's a little more private and they can get away with more over there.
Okay.
So there potentially could be, but nothing serious that I would foresee.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess my 2 cents would be, maybe look into options and see if there's any options on the table that don't involve us, jumping all in right now financially as far as the general fund's concerned.
I would reiterate what the rest of the council has said. I mean, I really like the idea. I see the benefit in it, but right now is not the right time. But I do have a question for legal. I know it's off, away from the project site, but legally, if this council so chooses and the Murphy Ranch proposal comes before council, could we include the construction of a restroom in a city park as one of the conditions of approval for that project, even though it's away from the site?
Probably be a tough thing. And I'd have to look at the site specifically and all that, so I'm going to answer at a very high level because I also don't want to say too many things, that could bite us later, but I will just say at a very high level, it's probably a hard nexus to show in terms of any kind of, it's what they call exactions in terms of either money or development requirements. There has to be a nexus that is both proportionate to the impacts of the project, as well as reasonably related to it. And so it's probably a hard nexus to show.
But similarly to that, if they expand the footprint of Shadowwood Park and make it actually usable because that's adjacent to the property site, that could be considered, correct?
It could be. We'd have to look at each situation on its own. That's obviously a function of staff, planning commission, whatever. They're going to look at that. But developers do have Quimby obligations, so they have to pay so much per EDU, equivalent dwelling unit, for the parkland in the city. So they'll have some kind of Quimby contribution, one where they're already under state law. So on top of that, we would just have to look at what specifically their development does that we could reasonably relate that to that requirement.
On the first topic, any annexation that comes forward does have a development agreement. The development agreement gives a little more flexibility in terms of being able to negotiate, certain, I don't want to call them conditions, but certain, provisions of the project. So keep that in mind. If I understood your last question correctly, currently staff is asking, and we can explore, is asking for the installation of a restroom in the expanded Shadowwood/Murphy Park project. So potentially, if that project moves forward, there would be a restroom in that park. The other just element of this is if that project moves forward, they will also be paying park development impact fees. And so there would be some revenue generated, a significant amount of revenue generated from that project for use across, the park system in the city.
Not to muddy the waters, but when the Main Street Park improvements were presented to this council, there was a restroom included in that. Is that separate from this?
Separate how?
Because this is looking at different city parks and the funding source for the Main Street Park, we were told we could use some of the Measure K grant funds towards that. Could the Measure K grant funds at least put the restroom in the park at Main Street? Or where is that at?
Yeah, so I think latest conversation is BNSF is not interested at this time in allowing improvements to the park without sort of reopening the contract we have with them. So it'd be a significant outlay of funds each year to make those improvements into the park. So that is, as I've understood direction, sort of off the table at this moment in time. And those Measure K funds would have to be related to ADA accessibility, walkability, and sort of downtown improvements. And, therefore then could not be used at a different park.
Just one last general question. Why are we looking at a modular restroom? Because obviously with the modular construction goes the price. I mean, you're paying a major convenience fee to go to a modular restroom. I was just curious.
We can explore other options. I think we were thinking that that would be the most cost-effective option, but perhaps that is not accurate.
Just to add one more comment, the bathroom proposals were also, it's to solve an additional problem that we do have at the parks, and that is the lack of water access. There are no water fountains at our parks except for Sanchez Park and Hogan Park, and I believe part of the discussion was installing a bathroom would also put water fountains at whichever park we had chosen. It's also going to just stand as that's an issue for our parks, and accessibility at our parks is the lack of water and water fountains for the people that are using them. So just wanted to put that out there as part of the reason why, and another problem that we were trying to solve. So.
Any other direction here from council? We probably should hear from the committee on this item here, seeing as though it is an agendized item.
I've just got one comment.
What you got there?
In regards to usage for recreation, don't get me wrong, I would love to have restrooms at our parks as long as somebody else pays for them. But can we pursue, portable restrooms to accommodate support during different recreation events? Like if it's just on a Saturday, we want to run games at another park, but it's not supporting it because we don't have a restroom. Can we look at bringing in portables for the weekend or something to be able to help separate activities, from just Hogan?
Yes, we can absolutely explore that. Just like installing a restroom, that comes with a cost as well. So we just have to explore that cost and what that does overall to the budget.
Anybody in the audience here have anything to say on this before we move on?
Yeah, a couple of observations. One, I think staff's done a good job. You can file it away for future reference because, like you said, we don't have the money for any of this. Number two, Shadowwood Park is in the Bellaterra LLD, so you can't just pop something in there without affecting the LLD. So you need a 218 vote if you ever pursue that. which is one of the reasons we want to have a town hall meeting with the expansion of that park into Murphy Ranch. Is Murphy Ranch part of our LLD? We don't know, so there's legalities there. So take Shadowwood off there. Dinosaur Parks in the Sunrise LLD, same situation. So I don't know if anybody's even asking for these things. Has there been a public outcry?
There's public support, I think, from
You know,
recreation.
this is a nice to have, but, you know, no, but, you know, they come out and play soccer in Shadowwood Park down there in a basin during the summer, and it's warm and hot down there, and they all bring their own water, so I don't know that a water fountain's necessarily there. Have we thought about what kind of people are going to be brought into the neighborhood if we start providing restroom facilities? I mean, has that been a problem over at Hogan Park?
We've got one person who we had issues with sleeping in there, which is why our officers go out there every night, do a security check and lock them up. And then Public Works unlocks them in the morning. And like I said, Hogan Park is in a highly trafficked area, so it gets a lot of attention, and I could potentially foresee issues with restroom facilities in more secluded areas in residential neighborhoods.
So you may be creating a problem you don't want. You know, another thing that's not up here, and maybe it's not an issue, is maintenance. Is that a maintenance cost to the city that hasn't been thought about in this? And maybe it's just part of the actual running of city facilities. So more needs to be done. I don't think you need to burden the staff with any more, you know, research into this thing. I think you just table it because I don't think it's been asked for. It's very, very expensive, whether you build it yourself or you throw in a modular, and you can always come back to it at any other time. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Sounds like staff's got direction on that at the current moment. We can move on to council communications. Councilman Strom, what do we have tonight?
Not much. Just want to say I attended the September 11th remembrance for the fire department. It's always a great event. Last week, and fortunately I was out of town, but from what I'm hearing, the Lions Club car show was a resounding success, over 500 cars. I heard there were cars everywhere. So congrats to the Lions Club on another well-attended event, and to the Legion and their pancake breakfast that went alongside the Lions Club car show. Other than that, I appreciate the input by the constituents that came tonight. John, thanks for all of the research you did on the IT, and that's about it.
Great, thank you. Councilman Walker.
Just a big thank you to Mr. Morris for coming out tonight and all your hard work you've been putting in for several months now, so I appreciate that. Gave us a lot to think about. And then besides that, I think we're good for tonight. So thank you guys for coming up and staying with us.
Councilman Engel.
Yeah, I see candidate signs going up. You know, we have an upcoming election. Just want to say publicly that I hope this one goes much smoother than the last one, and all the dirty deeds that were done during the last election are not done this go-round. Best of luck to everybody involved.
Thanks. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I would say that's a good thought. I had just one thing I wanted to kind of ask on the, or propose to you guys up here at the diocese. Is it possible for me to put on the agenda the idea of potentially dedicating the B field to, and putting in Greg Largent's name is what I was kind of thinking about doing if we could. I spoke to the family and they would be okay with that. But I think it would
So right now we have Sketty Field. And the other one's has not had a name on it?
Not that I can tell.
Okay. Okay.
support you on that.
I know Greg
Okay.
Largent well. I played ball with him, school with him. I'd be in favor of that option, an idea to discuss further, move that along.
Does that have to come back to the council vote, or do we just do it?
He was my softball coach and mentor, so I highly support this idea.
I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Other than that, it sounds like the Lions Club really did their thing like they always do. I was unable to attend as well, but I know 500 cars is quite a few cars. Okay, I was going to, well,
300?
About 300, yeah.
potatoes, potatoes.
Very good.
That's a lot of cars.
Just rounding up, folks, just rounding up.
And I'm assuming there's more drivers this time parking them?
Oh, God, there were quite a few people parking cars this time.
Awesome. So other than that, that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you. Just a couple things, Supervisor Collins. I like the before and after pictures for projects. I think that's great to get out to the community, with the sidewalk project, so continue that when we have good projects out there to spread the pictures for people to see. I like seeing those myself, so continue that where you can, where it's possible.
I'll give credit to Jalen on that, but we'll continue.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Thank you.
I was able to attend the breakfast and the car show, the American Legion. They were working tirelessly out there for several hours, getting everything going, and I didn't see anybody walk away hungry. It looked like they had full bellies on the way out. Like everybody said here, the cars were beautiful out there. Partial to the one that won Best of Show. It was a very beautiful Corvette, split window there. So yeah, congrats to the person who owned that vehicle. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting for now. We're going to go into closed session, and we'll be back if there's anything to report. Wow, she left a fancy pin for me and everything. I'll go ahead and sit down. I'm hot.
Based on both options,
Hi, Mike.
I can tell you what cost is, but that would be sharing proprietary information.
All right, good evening, everybody. We're back from closed session. We have no reportable news from this closed session, and we will see you all at the next city council meeting.